let's check in with Lawrence Jones. He is live down on our southern border in El Paso. He visited Fort Bliss with our defense secretary and our friend Pete Hegseth for that first border visit since his confirmation. And then they also flew on a Black Hawk with Tom Homan as well. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, good morning, family. I just want to piggyback on y'all last conversation because this is why the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was here. You know, a lot of people don't know, but we have a military assets that focus on the narcotics that impact our country. It was created back in the 60s by JFK, and that's U.S. Southern Command right here in Fort Bliss. That's why the Secretary of Defense was here. He said that we haven't been using these assets the way we should. It's clear that there's a threat coming across the border as it relates to the drugs, and they're going to get active real fast. Here's a little bit of our conversation yesterday.
We have no better negotiator at the helm than our Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, knowing how to use economic pressure to get results on the ground. Let's see how Mexico responds with troops and whether or not they actually do stem the flow. But all I know is what we can affect, and we are not going to back down. Intimidation is not going to work. And the message I have for the troops here is across the board is we have their backs. We have your back. We're going to give you the tools necessary to get 100% operational control of that border.
A lot of people talk about the corruption in Mexico. Can we trust those guys? Will they actually be helpful to the mission?
Well, they're helpful. The first administration, President Trump, made Mexico put military on the border, and it was very effective. He made Mexico agree to remain in Mexico program, right? This is national security. When we secure the border, less people die from fentanyl, less women and children sex trafficked, less people on terrorist watches cross that border. This is a national security issue. President Trump's going to shut it down.
So some people may be wondering what the setup is. Why have Tom Homan, the borders are on one side, and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, on the other side? The Secretary made it very clear, Secretary Hegseth, he's going to focus on the outside of the border, going after the enemies there, making sure the border is secure from that aspect. Tom Homan is going to focus on Border Patrol, the interior aspect of it, as well as with ICE, hunting the bad guys, the criminal aliens inside of the country. It's a two-pronged approach, and then you got Marco Rubio that is going to be communicating with all those foreign countries to make sure they take their people back and they prevent them from coming to the country in the first place unless they want to do it the legal way.
That's right. And yesterday, Marco Rubio negotiated a deal with El Salvador. Now, El Salvador will be a safe third country, so anybody from, let's say, China that China won't take back, we can now send them to El Salvador. They said we'll take everybody, including members of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua as well. So that is going to be very helpful because just think about it. If you are being trafficked across the southern border by a cartel, I have no idea how they're going to get in. But if they are, how do you make that pitch? All right, if you get into the country, you could live in San Diego or you could live in Omaha or whatever. But now the news is if you get in the country, you might get sent essentially to a mega prison in El Salvador or Gitmo.
Yep. And Lawrence was mentioning Tom Homan, the interior of our country over the weekend. They nabbed so many people. ICE did. The senior Trump administration official that talked to Fox News Digital said agents nabbed over 700 illegal immigrants over the weekend, including more than 500 with convictions or charges. And I was looking through the list. One person, a Honduran national, arrested in San Antonio, Texas, close to where you are, Lawrence. And she had a conviction of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Another one in Seattle, a Mexican citizen with a conviction for robbery and delivering meth. One in Phoenix, Arizona, a Mexican national with a murder conviction. One in Detroit, a Colombian man convicted of domestic violence and possession of cocaine.
So I just want to give you a tidbit, Ainsley, because those are the people that are already in the country. So we got to prevent them from even being able to make that journey across. Banks, he used to be the Texas border czar. He's now the chief of Border Patrol, 4-star. He had a process when he was the border czar in Texas with the National Guard, essentially instructing them to push them back. So what you've seen during the Biden administration, a lot of the migrants would just surrender. They've already did the app, and they knew they were going to get a notice to appear, and then they would be released in the country. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is adopting that same strategy with the troops on the border now. So people aren't just going to be able to surrender. If they see people trying to break in the country, they're going to say, go back. They will push them back. And if they attack those border agents, like with a mob, like they do with some of these caravans, they're going to have the pepper bullets as well, like Texas used then. So you're not going to see this surge of people coming across the border anymore. There are people there to meet them when they try to cross the border.
And of course, that underscores the very vital importance of the Remain in Mexico policy, because if they never actually cross the border, then it doesn't become a problem. It doesn't become our problem.
That's exactly right. And that is why the troops are on fire right now. They got fire in their belly right now. They get to do their jobs. By the way, I told y'all earlier about I spoke with some of those troops. We're actually going to air some of that conversation of me speaking just with rank and file. I mean, in the last administration, we were prohibited from talking with them. We didn't get to hear their stories. Finally, the shackles are off of them, and they can tell the American people how they feel.
That's great. You said morale is up. And Brian Kilmeade keeps saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that our border crossings are down 93%. Isn't that the statistic he always says?
Substantial.
It's
a big number.
Lawrence?
Yep, that's it, right. And they're trying to get the numbers daily so we can have a tracker, but it's around the 90s, Ainsley. I think you're correct.
That's amazing.
So Lawrence, when you were in that ride-along, in that Black Hawk, going from where you are, El Paso, to the west through New Mexico, how big are the existing gaps in the wall?
There are some big gaps, and I'm so glad you asked that question. I got to talk with the former border czar of Texas as well, who's now over all the Border Patrol, chief of Border Patrol. And I asked him about the money, because this is a question that y'all guys asked me yesterday in the show. He said, essentially, they haven't used money from 2020, 21, and 24. So they're going to already start the construction of the border wall. Now, it's not going to be enough to complete all of the wall. They're going to need that reconciliation bill to pass. But there's enough money to restart the Trump wall that was incomplete.
Have they been able to get all those pieces back that the previous president tried selling off?
No, they haven't. They were able to stop some of it because a federal judge made them stop selling off the wall before in that past administration. But a lot of that stuff was sold. And you got to remember, we had already paid for that.
Yeah,
and then they were so upset with Texas. Texas offered to buy the rest of that wall that they were selling to reconstruct it ourselves. We were going to pay billions of dollars to do it. And the Biden administration refused to sell it to Texas. So there was a lot of just petty behavior from the last administration that made us less safe as a result.
Yep, and then your governor had to step in and say, we're not selling this wall just to the lowest bidder. We need this wall to stay here. And then Donald Trump, of course, took over, and hopefully what's left of it will be able to be used again.
All of it intentional.
Indeed. Yeah. And Lawrence just mentioned a moment ago, tomorrow he will be featured from Texas, where we once again are going to hear from some of the troops. Lawrence, great job.
Great to see you.